Black History Month from memory was set up with three main aims, I think, for people to learn, appreciate, and reflect. And I think it's important for people of all colours, black, white, and any other persuasion, to learn about some of the injustices that have taken place in the past, to appreciate the contribution that black people have made to this country and further afield, and then to reflect on how those experiences, or the experiences of black people in the past, how it should inform the way that we behave going forward. And I do think it's really important. And I think it was Nelson Mandela who said, education can be the most powerful tool to change the world. I probably adapted what he said, but it was something like that. Because if you're not aware of the history and you don't allow the good things to continue, the good things that happened in the past to continue, and the negative things, try and eradicate those negative things, we'll never learn as a race. And that's why I think it's important in a nutshell.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Nigel. I think education is huge. And as you say, even Nelson Mandela said, as you ad-libbed his quote, it can change the world. And I think until people understand the history and the culture of black people, it's important to highlight it at a certain point. And then eventually, I guess the aim is to get to the point where you don't need to have a specific month to celebrate black history, because people understand it and it's integrated into the culture of society, and there's no need to highlight it. But I think at the moment where things stand, it does need its own separate month. And obviously things do go on throughout the whole year, but I think it's important that hopefully it means more people acknowledge and recognise black history. And as Nigel said, we can't move forward. It's easier to move forward in the future if we understand and learn from the past.
And I think that's right. And talking personally about the challenges that I faced when I was a young man, I went to Rumney High School a long time ago, Emma, in the 1970s. And there were 1,400 pupils in the school, and there were about 10 black children. It was a very difficult education in the widest sense of the word. And every day I got up and I went to school, certainly in the first 3 or 4 years of high school, and I felt nervous about being black. I wasn't ashamed of being black or anything like that, but I felt nervous about being black because I knew that would have an influence on my day. And from a very young age, of about 14 or 15, I vowed that I would train as hard as I could. I would be the best version of myself I could to take away the influence of any negativity from outside. So it did shape me, and that's why it's important, and that's why I feel not emotional about it, but I am committed to making sure that society that my children live in and their children live in is a much fairer and more just one. I don't know how you felt as a child, Emma. I know you're a lot younger than me, so you don't have to state that.
I was going to say I schooled in the 90s, which again is still quite old compared to some of the young people now. But I think I had similar experiences. I went to King's Norton Girls' School, and I think it was significant for me because I knew I was the only black person, and I knew that how I carried myself would influence how people thought about me. And I think at the time, I didn't necessarily realise that my actions and what I did would actually impact other black people, because there were so few figures around. People would just sort of judge me and put that judgment on other people. I think in hindsight, growing up, I guess I think I did myself proud and did black people proud, but I didn't necessarily understand that I was carrying that mantle at the time. And I think it's actually great that now things are changing, and so hopefully there's young people in schools who are black and are just celebrating the fact that they're black and are treated equally. And I think the more we have Black History Month, hopefully the more we'll move forward in a positive direction.
But if I go back to when I first started, sport gave me a pass, because when you were good at sport, people recognised you and they were prepared to look outside of your colour at something else that you were good at. And that made me feel part of society because I had something to contribute. So it is really important that we celebrate sport in that way, and that it is a great leveller. And if you look at the diversity of Commonwealth or Team England, Commonwealth Games England, it's probably the most diverse team anywhere in the UK. And as a board member, as you will know, the board takes that very seriously. I've been on Commonwealth Games England board now for 6/7 years. You were competing when I was on the Commonwealth Games England board. I'm really interested for you to explain what it was like competing in that diverse team, and could you feel the influence of the board in trying to make it a happy experience for everybody?
I feel like Commonwealth Games is almost a bringing together of diversity and cultures. And so when I've been competing at Commonwealth Games, I've never felt black, which I think sometimes walking down the street in the UK or various places, I feel black, which I think is wrong, because I should just feel like myself and a person. And so actually, I guess the board, I should say, pat you on the back and say well done, in the fact that I just felt like part of the wider Team England team, and it was irrelevant of colour or anything else. And I think now that I'm on the board myself, I love the fact that I'm black and I can bring my experiences. But I think the biggest thing is equality. It's important for me that equality exists. And so, as Nigel said, I just bring my own perspective of things and how I've been through life, as does every other person on the board. And so that hopefully will reflect the UK and its rich diversity.
And I was going to ask you what your vision of the future would look like.
Well, you go first.
Well, I would want us not to be having these conversations, whether it be 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, because people understand the value and the contribution that Black people from a BAME background can make. And there's a level playing field, and we don't have to have rules or regulations in place that you must have 20% or 30% or it must be this, because it will happen naturally. What I will say is there are some things that can be done behind the scenes. Young people, and everybody's young compared to me, young people can be encouraged, they can be mentored, they can be made ready, so that when the opportunities arise, they are ready to take a position and move seamlessly into it and make a contribution straight away. If people are not primed, if people can't see themselves reflected in those positions that they might aspire to, they're never going to do it. So people do need some encouragement. And then when they get there, and this is my favorite quote, it'll be my last quote today, the Maya Angelou quote. Maya Angelou, of course, a civil rights activist in the 60s and a poet, said, "People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And when people get into those positions, they've got to be made to feel welcome and that their contribution is valued. And that is just as important as getting them there in the first place.